back everyone. Another video on request, line by line explanation of the poem Death of a Naturalist, which details the exploits of a young boy collecting frog spawns from a flag's dam. And who is the poet? It's Seamus Heaney. The narrator remembers everything he saw and felt at those times. He then remembers his teacher telling him all about frogs in a section that speaks volumes about childhood innocence. Childhood innocence is a theme of this poem. Finally, we hear about a trip to the flag's dam that went wrong. He feels threatened by the grown-up frogs. His interest in nature has gone. This is the death of a naturalist suggested in the poem's title. Dear girls and boys, prepare your long answer question. Justification of the title of the poem, Death of a Naturalist. Now, who is a naturalist? A naturalist is a person who studies nature, especially plants and animals in the natural surroundings. Here, in this poem, the naturalist is the speaker of the poem, a schoolboy, presumably the poet himself in his childhood days. So this is the title. We have childhood innocence. We also have the loss of childhood innocence, the subsequent loss of childhood innocence on maturity. This poem touches upon the complexities of childhood, the transition from innocence to experience, and the duality of nature. What is this duality of nature? There is a shift in the poem which highlights the poem's central theme of the loss of innocence and the realization that the natural world can be both beautiful and harsh. This is the duality of nature. The narrative structure of the poem is significant as it reflects the speaker's journey from innocence and enchantment to fear and disillusionment. So there is this transformation. Understood? So take down the themes, the major themes of this poem. Just write them down before we start the poem. So theme number 1, we know childhood innocence. Theme number 2, loss of innocence. And then theme number 3, it's coming of age. And then we have nature and its beauty, fear and disgust. We will discuss these themes in detail as we start reading the poem. Now, justification of the title of the poem. I'll just quickly discuss some points so that you can frame your answer. How to justify the title of the poem. Listen to me carefully. The title of the poem, Death of a Naturalist, is significant and carries multiple meanings. We can interpret it in multiple ways. So on one level, it refers to the literal death of a naturalist. The young speaker's fascination with the natural world is abruptly cut short by the threatening frogs that invade the flag's dam. This event marks the death of the speaker's innocence and his realization that nature can be both beautiful and threatening. And we have another interpretation. The title can be interpreted metaphorically as well, reflecting the idea that the speaker's experience represents a larger shift in perspective towards nature. The death of a naturalist could be seen as a metaphor for the loss of innocence that occurs when one realizes the complexity and potential danger of the natural world. Again, we have the broader themes of mortality and inevitability of death here. The title suggests that the naturalist, that is the speaker, will experience a similar fate as the frog spawn that dies and decomposes, becoming part of the cycle of life and death. This poem is specifically rooted in Irish rural life, describing the Irish countryside vividly down to the way it smells. And the poem is written in blank verse, unrhymed lines of iambic pentameter. As such, there is no rhyme scheme and it is a heavily enjambed poem. What is the meaning of this? It is a heavily enjambed poem with sentences moving from one line into the next. Enjambment is a figure of speech. All here the flax dam festered in the heart. Flax dam festered, figure of speech, alliteration of the townland. Green and heavy-headed. Heavy-headed again, alliteration. Flax had rotted there, weighted down by huge sods. What is flax? Flax is a plant whose fibers are used for making linen. And flax dam is a pool or a swampy area used for retting flax. A pond-like place where flax is placed to expose its stems to the sun to rot, to soften its fibers. Festered, rotted or decayed. And what is townland? Townland is a colloquial expression for a farm or field. Here, it is a small division of land in Ireland. And the meaning of heavy-headed is with large heads. And weighted, burdened or oppressed. Sods, clumps of soil. Therefore, the poem starts with the description of a flax dam, a pond created for retting flax, for fermenting flax, that is situated in the poet's townland. The flax dam is described as festering and rotting throughout the year with large-headed flax weighed down by huge clumps of soil. All year. This expression is important. The poem begins with the expression all year that sets the period and time scale, and this suggests predictability, something which the speaker knows and takes comfort in. The use of the word daily again. See here, it's daily stresses the fact that this happened time and time again and this was normal. As a child, the poet visited the flax dam. Here the speaker visited the flax dam. So this was a routine for him. The speaker has scientific curiosity to see how frogs develop from eggs, as is told to them in the class by his teacher. So he visits the flax dam where the flax rots in the heat of the sun. Daily it sweltered in the punishing sun. Punishing sun, very hot sun. The sun here is personified as an oppressive being, sweltered to suffer from oppressive heat. And the word daily stresses the fact that this happened all the time and this was normal. Sweltered suggests uncomfortable heat, and punishing sun, we have already discussed, suggests personification of the sun. The speaker here goes on to describe the flax dam as a space buzzing and humming with vibrant life, auditory imagery as well as visual imagery with the presence of blue bottles, dragonflies and the spotted butterflies. Bubbles gargled is important. Gargling sound is an example of onomatopoeia, and gargled is also an example of oxymoron. Dear students, I have given the definition. It's there on the screen. Just go through the definition. There were dragonflies, insects with long slender bodies and wings, spotted butterflies, butterflies with spots on their wings, but best of all was the warm, thick slobber. Slobber, saliva that drools from the mouth. A frog spawn, the jelly-like eggs of a frog that grew like clotted water. The figure of speech here is simile, like clotted water. Frog spawn's growth is likened to clotted water, an image that reminds us of blood and vampires. In the shade of the banks. Despite the unpleasant conditions of the Flags Dam, there are still beautiful creatures that can be found there, such as dragonflies and spotted butterflies. However, the speaker's favorite thing to find is the warm and thick frog spawn that grows in the shade of the banks. The description of the dragonflies, spotted butterflies and the warm slobber at the Flags Dam conveys the speaker's childlike mindset and evokes warm innocence. Although the Flags Dam is a disgusting place full of rotten, stinky flags, it does not have a repulsive effect on him. Rather, the speaker seems to be fascinated with the Flags Dam, the sight, sound, smell, and the buzzing life around it. Fattening dots, this expression is an example of metaphor. Fattening dots are metaphors for growing eggs in size, and every spring. The use of every suggests routine, expectation and anticipation of the speaker. He would catch the frog spawn and put them into jam jars and place them on window sills at home and on shelves at school so that they could be studied. Jam potfuls. This is a childlike word that once again suggests the speaker's eagerness and excitement at the thought of collecting the frog spawn in the jars of jam. The reference to the frog spawn, as specks creates a strong visual image. This is an example of visual imagery suggesting the minuscule size of the eggs such that the speaker does not realize that these are real living animals, and by stealing them he is not thinking about the consequences of his actions. These eggs are so tiny that he steals them without thinking about the results, and this he would realize later. Here the speaker just wanted to watch the frog eggs hatch to see the fattening dots burst out of the eggs. The speaker wanted to see them grow into nimble, swimming tadpoles. The speaker's attitude towards this natural process was one of fascination and curiosity. He wanted to study the life cycle of the frogs because Miss Walls had given him this information about the frogs. Miss Walls personified the frogs, calling them Daddy and Mammy as though they formed a human family. And this personification does not upset the speaker's relationship with the frogs. He continued to observe the life cycle of frogs with childish innocence and curiosity, inquisitiveness of the speaker. And in fact, he is obsessed with frogs to such an extent that he repeated the word frog obsessively, giving rise to diacope. Now, what is diacope? Underlining the depth of the speaker's curiosity about these creatures and their lives. Here also the speaker continues to be a naturalist studying the natural world. Miss Walls would tell us how the daddy frog was called a bullfrog and how he croaked and how the mammy frog laid hundreds of little eggs, and this was frog spawn. Here he remembers how his teacher, Miss Walls, taught him and his classmates about the different types of frogs and also how to tell the weather by their color. You could tell the weather by frogs too, for they were yellow in the sun and brown in rain. Here, it appears that the speaker is jumping between unrelated facts with all the energy and enthusiasm of an excited child. The teacher uses childish language, lucid language, in order to explain and discuss this natural phenomenon, the life cycle of frogs. And the children grasp this concept with childish innocence and curiosity. Here again we have the speaker's childish innocence and curiosity, that he could tell how the weather would be by looking at the color of the frogs. After this, the next stanza, then one hot day, then. The stanza begins with the word then, which is called the volta. What is volta? A turn that marks a major shift within a poem. A shift in terms of tone, diction, imagery, movement, sound and place. The speaker, as usual, visits the Flag's Dam. The one hot day suggests a radical reversal of the condition. Then one hot day, when the fields were rank with cow dung in the grass, the angry frogs, here they are no longer nimble swimming tadpoles. The frogs have become angry frogs again. Frogs are personified as angry frogs. The poem takes a turn here when the poet describes how the frogs become angry and invade the Flag's Dam on a hot day. He hears a new and coarse croaking sound that he has never heard before. Invaded the Flag's Dam, entered in large numbers. I ducked through hedges to a coarse croaking that I had not heard before. He confesses that this is for the first time that he hears such a rough or harsh croaking sound. He finds the field around the Flag's Dam filled with unpleasant smell of cow dung. The speaker notices the angry frogs who have invaded the dam and also their coarse croaking. The word invaded suggests in great numbers, and seeing the angry frogs invading the Flag's Dam, the speaker thinks that the frogs are annoyed with him and that they want to take revenge on him just like an army. The speaker has described himself as ducking through hedges on seeing the angry frogs, so he is scared. The boy is retreating and is no longer feeling safe and secure in the environment that he so loved. The air was thick with a bass chorus. Right down the dam, gross-bellied frogs were cocked on sods. Their loose necks pulsed like sails. Like sails, here again we have simile. The throbbing of the frog's loose necks here is compared to the waving of sails. So the figure of speech here is simile. What is chorus? Chorus is a group of sounds or voices. The poet observes the frogs in the Flag's Dam and describes how they are gathered there in great numbers with swollen-bellied frogs. Swollen-bellied, gross-bellied with swollen bellies, sitting on the sods with their loose necks, pulsing like sails. Some of the frogs are jumping around and their movements are accompanied by obscene sounds. And what are the obscene sounds? So here again we have auditory imagery as well as visual imagery. Some hopped. The slap and plop were obscene threats. Slap and plop, onomatopoeia, figure of speech. And this is visual imagery. Some sat poised like mud grenades. Again, what is a figure of speech? Simile. Their blunt heads farting. I sickened, turned and ran. Very, very important. Some hopped, some jumped. Slap and plop, sounds made by the frogs, and obscene, offensive or disgusting. And poised, balanced or ready to move. And what are mud grenades? Mud grenades, small round mud balls, and blunt heads farting, releasing gas from their bodies. So here he is no longer fascinated, but the speaker is disgusted. He is disillusioned. The speaker begins by describing the sound of the croaking of the frogs like a bass chorus, rough, eerie and natural sound. The word chorus suggests great numbers and a group that is unified in its cause. The frogs are all united and the harsh sound indicates the hoarseness in the speaker's voice that has come with adolescence. Again, growing up of the speaker. The speaker is dismayed. He is disliking the entire space now. And he uses words like gross-bellied frogs. Gross is a pun, an adjective that means large and also rude and disgusting, jumping into the pond. And they make a sound that seems like obscene threats. Obscene threats is a metaphor that suggests the sound is both threatening and dirty. The frogs' necks inflate when they croak, and this repels the speaker. He hates it. These comparisons are significant as they underline an important change in the speaker's relationship with the frogs. The frogs are no longer separate from human beings, and the speaker is no longer a naturalist. The speaker seems threatened by the dirty, foul world of the frogs. Whenever you are studying this poem, prepare your long answer question, relationship before this experience and relationship after the radical change, the transformation. Both these aspects must be prepared well. So long answer questions as well as short answer questions. Attitude of the speaker. I sickened, turned and ran. He ran away from there. The boy feels that the frogs are like mud grenades, symbolizing their violent attitude. The words, the sounds, the onomatopoeia, slap and plop suggest a sense of assault from the frogs. And the speaker felt that the frogs were angry and he runs away from there. I sickened. He was feeling sick, disgusted, turned and ran. The great slime kings were gathered there for vengeance. The purpose of their presence there for vengeance, in order to take revenge. The speaker describes the frogs as the great slime kings, exaggeration, who have come on the speaker for stealing the frog spawns. Initially, because of his childish innocence, because of his inquisitiveness, curiosity, he did not consider stealing the frog spawn as a crime. But now, after the attainment of maturity and experience, he feels that the frogs have come here in order to punish him. And the eggs were too tiny for him to consider the eggs as real living animals, and therefore he just wanted to study, he wanted to observe the life cycle of the frog. He did not think, I have discussed this, he did not think of the consequences of his action, but now he feels that the great army, the great slime kings have come here for revenge, to take revenge on him. And I knew that if I dipped my hand, the spawn would clutch it. The speaker becomes overwhelmed by the sight and sound of the frogs, and he runs away. He sees the frogs as the great slime kings and feels that they are there for revenge. He also realizes that if he were to dip his hand into the water, the frog spawn would cling to it, which only adds to his disgust. He is filled with disgust. Here he is worried that if he dips his hand, the spawn would clutch it. The speaker feels he would be contaminated by the frogs, their smell, the slobbery world. The speaker has grown up in the interval between the first and the second stanzas, moved from innocence to experience. The speaker is now an adolescent who views the facts of life, the creation of life and its early development as repulsive and frightening. Imagery plays an important role in the poem as Heaney uses detailed and often visceral descriptions to create a vivid picture of the Flag's Dam and its inhabitants. So a long answer question once again, imagery used in the poem. And Heaney also uses sensory language to immerse the reader in the environment with phrases like bubbles gargled delicately, blue bottles wove a strong gauze of sound around the smell. This technique helps to convey the speaker's fascination with the natural world and his eagerness to explore it. Here we have the speaker's journey from an innocent, curious child to a more disillusioned, fearful individual. This is the progression from enchantment to repulsion, and this is also evident in the disturbing imagery of the menacing frogs and also the language used later in the poem. We have gross-bellied, loose necks, pulse-like sails and mud grenades towards the end of the poem. And we also have obscene threats, farting, croaking, coarse croaking to suggest this transformation, this radical change. After this, I have already discussed hyperbole, exaggeration. And now the themes very quickly. Childhood innocence. The poem is set in the poet's childhood and it depicts the innocent fascination he had with nature. Here Heaney, with the help of the speaker, remembers collecting frog spawn every spring and being captivated by the transformation of the eggs into tadpoles. The invasion of the flag's dam by angry frogs causes him to lose this innocence and realize that the natural world can be both beautiful and frightening. So this is childhood innocence. After this, loss of innocence. The poem reflects the loss of innocence that comes with growing up. We have fear and disgust. The poet's childhood fascination with the natural world is replaced by fear and disgust when the frogs invade the flag's dam. Again, here we have the idea that the natural world can be both beautiful and ugly and that our perceptions of it can change over time. We have nature and its beauty. What is it? Despite the presence of rotting flax and the invading frogs, the poem portrays the natural world as beautiful. The imagery is used to describe the creatures in the flag's dam, dragonflies, spotted butterflies, frog spawn, and this evokes a sense of wonder and appreciation for the natural world. And coming of age. This can be seen as a coming of age story, as the speaker's experience with the frogs marks a turning point in his childhood. His encounter with the frogs serves as a metaphor for the loss of innocence that often comes with growing up. So these are the themes of this poem.